Under the aegis of Navyug Pragati, the Navyug School educational YouTube channel, I, Deepika Gurnani, am here to present the very last theme of your history book, Theme 15, Framing the Constitution. Yes, the beginning of a new era. What is a constitution? What is its need? And how was the constitution prepared? When was it implemented? These comprise of the basic learning objectives, the composition of the Constituent Assembly, the vision of the Constitution, the preamble, its meaning, and finally, defining rights, that is, protection given to the different minorities, and prior to that, defining minorities. The Indian Constitution came into effect on 26 January 1950. This has been a historic date for India because on 26 January 1930 we celebrated our Independence Day prior to getting independence. The Indian Constitution is the longest constitution in the world. It is designed to keep the country together and to take it forward. It sought to heal the wounds of the past and the present, and finally attempted to nurture democratic institutions. Making of the Indian Constitution. Yes, it took nearly 3 years to frame the Constitution from December 1946 to November 1949. Its drafts were discussed clause by clause in the Constituent Assembly of India to avoid any room for ambiguities. In fact, it was a tumultuous time. Fresh in the popular memory were the Quit India struggle of 1942 and its after effects. Bid by Subhash Chandra Bose to win freedom through armed struggle with foreign aid. The rising of the Royal Indian Navy in Bombay and other cities. Scattered mass protests of workers and peasants in different parts of the country. The Great Calcutta Killings of August 1946. Rioting across northern and eastern India. Massacres that accompanied the transfer of populations when the partition of India was announced. Problems faced by the new nation was that of the princely states. The making of the Constituent Assembly was a great task. The provincial legislatures then chose the representatives to the Constituent Assembly. Basically, there was dominance of the Congress. The Constituent Assembly had nearly 300 members. The chief members from the Congress were Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Very important member of the assembly was lawyer and economist Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He served as the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution. Serving with him were two other lawyers, K. M. Munshi from Gujarat and Aladi Krishnaswamy Iyer from Madras. This took 3 years in all, with the printed record of the discussions taking up 11 bulky volumes. Members of the Constituent Assembly were eloquent in expressing divergent points of views. The vision of the Constitution as envisioned by the Constitution makers. On 13th December 1946, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru introduced the Objectives Resolution, which outlined the defining ideals of the Constitution of Independent India. It proclaimed India to be an independent, sovereign republic, guaranteed to its citizens justice, equality, and freedom. Adequate safeguards shall be provided for minorities, backward and tribal areas, and depressed and other backward classes, was the quote. The objective of the Indian Constitution would be to fuse the liberal ideas of democracy with socialist idea of economic justice. The Constituent Assembly was expected to express the aspirations of those who had participated in the movement for independence. Here you can see the original and the amended preambles. The original and the amended preambles both read out, "We, the people of India." That means the ultimate power was with the people. In the amended text, we have the addition of words like socialist and secular in the preamble. This is the basic difference in the two. This amendment took place by the 42nd Amendment Act. Now coming to the protection of the minorities and defining rights. How were the rights of individual citizens to be defined? Were the oppressed groups to have any special rights? What rights would minorities have? Who in fact would be defined as a minority? These would have to be debated and conflicting ideas would have to be reconciled. The need was to create a political framework in which minorities could live in harmony with others. B. Poker Bahadur from Madras made a powerful plea for continuing separate electorates. Minorities, he said, could not be wished away, they could not be erased out of existence. Minorities were to be well represented within the political system, so there was a need for separate electorates. This demand for separate electorates provoked anger and dismay. R.V. Dhulekar told Bahadur to give up the idea of separate electorates. Sardar Patel declared it as poison that has entered the body politic of our country. Govind Vallabh Pant declared that it was not only harmful for the nation but also for the minorities themselves. By 1949, most Muslim members of the Constituent Assembly were agreed that separate electorates were against the interests of the minorities. We will need much more than this resolution. Yes, N.G. Ranga, a socialist, urged the term minorities be interpreted in economic terms. Real minorities were the poor and the downtrodden. It was essential to create conditions where these constitutionally enshrined rights could be effectively enjoyed. One of the groups mentioned by Ranga was the tribals. Jaipal Singh spoke eloquently on the need to protect the tribes and ensure conditions that could help them come up to the level of the general population. Tribes were not a numerical minority, he argued, but they needed protection, as they had been dispossessed of the land they had settled, deprived of their forests and pastures, and forced to move in search of new homes. Perceiving them as primitive and backward, the rest of the society had turned away from them, spurned them. Ambedkar had demanded separate electorates for the depressed castes. Mahatma Gandhi had opposed it, arguing that this would permanently segregate them from the rest of the society. We have been suffering, but we are prepared to suffer no more, were the views of J. Nagappa from Madras. We have realized our responsibilities. We know how to assert ourselves. The Constituent Assembly finally recommended that untouchability be abolished, Hindu temples be thrown open to all castes, and seats in legislatures and jobs in government offices be reserved for the lowest castes, though initially for a period of 10 years. Now, by way of this talk, we have learned about the historical background of the Constituent Assembly and making of the Indian Constitution, the importance of the preamble, the vision of the Constitution makers, protection of the marginalized sections of the society. We have learned about the divergent views as presented in the Constituent Assembly. Thank you. Jai Hind!